Hype is all well and good, but if a book does not live up to the hype, then life has no meaning. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am bringing you another A Book and a Brew, where I get a brew and I talk about some books that I have read recently. These three are all going to be books that I had hyped for this year. These are books that I had on my radar ever since I had heard they were coming out. They're by my favourite authors and I could not wait to pick them up. I have finally read all three that are on this list and I am ready to share my thoughts with you. We're going to talk about them in chronological order to when I read them. So let us start with back in April of this year when I read Last Night, or as you might also know it, Just Last Night, written by Mhairi McFarlane. The book follows Eve and three of her friends and opens with one of my favourite things in the whole wide world. A quiz. I absolutely love table quizzes, pub quizzes, any kind of general knowledge stuff, and I'm all over it. The four of them have been attending this quiz night for such a long time and they are always bested by another table around them. On the way home, Susie, who is one of the group and one of Eve's closest friends, is in a car accident and unfortunately loses her life in this. And this sends the entire group into a spin. I did love the dynamic between the friends both before and after Susie passed away. When you've been friends for so long, as these people have, I think they met in university and were now in their early to mid 30s. When you've been friends with somebody for so long, you get to know their intricate details, you get to know things about them, you get to know their quirks, and you could absolutely see that in this group. Not only that, but they also were so comfortable with slagging each other, with having little jokes at everybody's expense, in the kind of a friendly camaraderie way that you would come to expect, and I'm sure that you do with your own friends. Eve has been in love with Ed, one of the other members of the friendship group, ever since they graduated, but back in the day there was a miscommunication and now she feels like he's the one that has gotten away. She feels like she was always the second option. I felt like this book was going to be kind of like a second chance friends to lovers romance, but it absolutely did not go down that path, and I'm really glad that it did, because the way that this was actually portrayed was much more intriguing. Throughout the book, you also meet Susie's brother Finn, who is living in New York at the moment and has come back for the funeral and to tie up some affairs that are to do with Susie's death. I really enjoyed getting to know him, watching him and Eve get to know each other again, because they had known each other from when they were younger. Watching them kind of get to know each other again, let some barriers down, start to let other people in, it was a really lovely journey to be on. Not only does it deal with the death of a loved one, with the bereavement and the grief that can come with that, but there is also a character here who is suffering from dementia. I have had a member of my family also affected by dementia, and I can say with my whole heart, this was dealt with really well in this book, and it was a very accurate portrayal of what it's like when a family member of yours is going through dementia. I really loved this book and I absolutely would recommend it. It does come with a couple of trigger warnings for death and for grief and bereavement, of course, but if that's something that you are comfortable with reading, I think you will really enjoy the closeness of this friendship group. I gave this book 4 stars. And then we swing all the way forward to November, when I picked up Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I finally managed to finish off the series, and I swear to you, this is probably the best one. In this book, we are following Eve, who is the youngest of the 3 Brown sisters, and she is not quite as independent as her 2 older sisters. She's still living at home, she's still living on the family's trust fund, and one day her parents sit her down and tell her that this has been cut off. It's time for her to go out, do what her 2 older sisters have done, and make a life for herself. Eve goes out to a local B&B with a restaurant attached and applies for a job there, does an interview, and one of the owners does not fall for her at all. He finds her really annoying, very entitled, spoiled, self-centered, so he turns her down. Eve goes out into the parking lot, gets into her car, and accidentally runs this guy over, breaking his arm. Jacob is then left with absolutely no choice but to hire Eve, because if he doesn't, the B&B is probably going to go under. I absolutely adored this very slow burn romance between Eve and Jacob, but it is also full of some absolutely phenomenal representation. Eve is black, she's a plus size woman, but also Jacob suffers from anxiety, and there are some really well written scenes here where Jacob's anxiety is starting to come to the fore, and you can see how he is trying to deal with that. When Jacob is having a panic attack in one scene, Eve also goes through the 5 methods of grounding yourself with him. And as somebody who has relied on the grounding method countless times, I absolutely loved seeing that in this book. Like the preceding 2 books in this series, this is a little bit spicier than the other 2 books that I'm going to recommend in this video. So if a spicy romance is not your kind of bag, probably don't pick this one up, but I absolutely loved the steamy scenes that were in this book. They were so well written. You could really see a connection between Eve and Jacob, and I absolutely adored reading this book. I will say there were a couple of things in this book that I didn't love. It did seem a little bit far-fetched that such a popular B&B would have such a small amount of staff. And there was a conflict that came up in the later half of the book that I didn't particularly love between Eve and Jacob. But other than that, it was a phenomenal book. It was such a great closeout to the series, and I cannot wait to see what other books Talia has got out there for me. I gave this one the easiest 4 stars. The final one in this video, just last week, I finished On a Night Like This by Lindsey Kelk. Lindsey Kelk is one of my auto-buy authors, so when I knew that this was coming out, it absolutely went onto my bookshelf, and I cannot impress upon you how much waiting for it paid off. Here you're following Fran, who is in a little bit of a flux in her life. Her relationship with her fiance is not going particularly well, and her career is also taking a little bit of a nosedive. She gets a phone call one day to ask her to come on board as the personal assistant for Juliet, one of the world's most famous pop stars, and she is whisked away on a plane from London to a Mediterranean island where she will be spending quite a lot of time on a huge, super luxurious yacht. While she's there, some hijinks ensue, which results in Fran attending the Crystal Ball, one of the world's most elite and secretive parties. While she's there, she meets an American called Evan, and they decide that as they're only going to see each other for one night, they come from such different backgrounds, such different lifestyles, that they don't need to share any kind of personal details. They don't need to swap stories about their lives. They're just going to have a good time together and get to know each other. I really loved this book. It features a character who I felt like is in quite a similar situation to I am. My career is kind of in a change at the moment. Life is kind of in a change at the moment. And I felt like this was something that really connected me to Fran. It also shows how talented Lindsey is at writing really, really unlikable partners for the main character. And Sebastian here was definitely one of those. I absolutely hated reading how he was with Fran, and when their eventual breakup did come, it was like the payoff was worth it. The book does feature a romance, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that is the central point of it, and that's something that I also really enjoyed. I do enjoy reading a romance, and I do enjoy getting swept up in a love story, but also I feel like the most important love story in this book was with Fran herself, where she was getting to know what her life was like. She was finding out what she really wanted in life, trying to kind of get her life back on track from where she thought she wanted it to go to where she actually wanted it to go. I absolutely loved seeing that kind of growth and change in Fran, and it's something that I really hope comes up in another book in the future. You also see a really sweet friendship blossoming between Fran and Juliet, and watching Juliet kind of come out of her shell and realize what life is like when you're not surrounded by people who just want to take advantage of you or want to be friends with you just because of your status. It was really, really wholesome to see. While the book has got quite a lot of light-hearted topics, there are also some really deep things that are dealt with here. It touches on the Me Too movement. There are LGBT characters who are not quite treated the best. There is a toxic relationship involved here. Everything in that sense was written so well. You could tell that it had been really well researched. You could tell that a lot of thought as to how to deal with this properly had gone into the writing, and I absolutely adored that part of it. It was so well written that I just could not get over it. This book is kind of a modernized Cinderella retelling, so if that is something that you really love, then I think you will absolutely adore this book. If you love Lindsey Kelk books, I think you'll agree with me that this is one of her best yet, and I gave this book a 4 stars. Those are some of the books that I could not wait to get to in 2021 that I actually genuinely loved reading. Sometimes the hype does work out. Does the hype ever pay off for you, or have you been burned before? Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.